Hey, welcome, welcome. So glad you're here with me tonight. And tonight we're going to be going over Delphi, and in particular, a memorandum that was just filed as part of a motion to suppress by the defense. Because in the memorandum, there's quite a few details about Richard Allen's incarceration. And so that's what we're going to be discussing here tonight. And I just want to also remind everyone to continue praying for True Crime Cult. His real name is Robert. And if you didn't know already, his brother has passed away a few days ago now. But anyone who's gone through the grieving process, who's lost a loved one, knows that after those first couple of days, that's when, you still have a lot of stuff going on with funerals and arrangements and things. So they really need our continued support through prayer. So I just want to mention that you continue to lift him up in prayer. So anyway, let's see, add to stage, slide 1. All right, now, can I make this bigger for you? Oh, I can make it a full screen layout. What's that do? Oh, that doesn't help. I want it to be wider. Let me go back to this way. Oh, that's an interesting view. I didn't know I could do that. Make myself that big, fill the screen like that. All right. So you know what I'm going to do? Let me open it and just open the PDF. Because then I can go like this. All right. And I think I need to remove this. Present. I'm going to have to share screen. I think. Is that how I did it before? Wait. Let me see if I can No, wait. Wait, that's open. Come back here, let me see. Share screen, window. There we go. This is the one I want. Yeah, okay. So, but now, how do I get me back to being small? No. Oh, more options. Oh, why don't I do this way? Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, so I'll do it like this. So there is a different document that is the motion to suppress that goes over that the defense is asking the court to not allow anything that was said or written by Richard Allen while he was incarcerated as evidence in the court. And they're requesting a hearing about that. Okay. In general, Judge Gull likes to decide on things without a hearing. She'll just say, I deny this without hearing. That's what she likes to do. So that's probably what she's going to do, but who knows? Maybe she'll have a hearing about it. And then, so that was like 2 or 3 pages. And then they attached a memorandum, they also submitted a memorandum. That is what we are going through. So let me go like this. So the defendant, Allen, was arrested in October of 2022 and immediately detained in the Carroll County Jail, as anybody should be. Allen was thereafter transferred to the White County Jail and ultimately charged with 2 counts of felony murder. The charges were lodged against him on October 28, 2022. On November 3rd, 2023, should that be 22? Because November 2023 was just last year. The Carroll County Sheriff petitioned the court for an order transferring jurisdiction of Allen's custody from the Carroll County Sheriff to the Indiana Department of Corrections. On the same day, and without the formality of a hearing on the sheriff's request, Judge Benjamin Diener signed an order, safekeeping order, transferring Allen's custody to the IDOC without Allen or his legal representatives, footnote number 1, having any input into his pretrial detainment. So if we look at the footnote, at the time the court signed the safekeeping order, Allen had yet to be appointed counsel. That's why I think this was 22. Yeah, in fact, Allen's court-appointed public defenders, Rozzi and Baldwin, did not enter their appearances until November 14th, 2022, and therefore Allen had no input. Hey, Chalet in the house. He had no input as to his pretrial detention circumstances. Oh, no problem. We're just getting started now. We're on page 1. The record should also reflect that the safekeeping order and all other exhibits referenced herein have been personally served on the court in the form of a supplemental appendix. Okay. So we're right here. Allen was then shipped off to the Westville Correctional Facility and placed in a maximum security segregation unit referred to by prison officials as WCU. Okay. The records suggest that just prior to his transfer to the WCU, Allen may have made a brief stop at the Reception Diagnostic Center, RDC, where some sort of intake procedure may have taken place, but it does not appear that Allen underwent any formal mental health assessment or testing to establish a baseline in terms of his mental health history or needs. Okay, so this is kind of setting up the first problem that they have, that the defense has, that he did not have any legal representation when the transfer was being requested. Okay. From approximately November 1st, 2022 through December of 2023, Allen remained incarcerated in the WCU. Allen's attorneys are unaware of any other pretrial detainee that has ever been housed in the WCU in the history of the facility, and most certainly not in the 5 or so years preceding his placement. Footnote number 2. I see, Chalet, you have another video just came up. You put the cash behind my mustache. Okay, so number 2. Put it up here in the middle so we can see it. Warden John Gallipo was deposed by the defense on Friday, March 22nd, 2024. So that's just last month, where he acknowledged he had worked in the IDOC for 28 years and was warden at Westville for approximately 5 years leading up to Allen's placement. Warden Gallipo acknowledged that during his entire tenure, he was unaware of any other circumstance involving the pretrial detention of a man who has not yet been convicted of a crime. See his attached transcript, which of course we don't have that. Okay, so number 2. So continuing here. Allen's attorneys have conducted depositions, watched video from Allen's cell and other video from within the prison, reviewed prison records regarding Allen's detention, reviewed Allen's medical and psychiatric records, and listened to audio interviews of prison inmates and guards conducted by law enforcement officials. So they've done a lot of research to understand what was happening. Through this process, Allen's attorneys have learned that Allen has been accused of making incriminating statements to both inmates and guards. Now, I think through this whole thing, he's not even touching on like phone calls to family. They're only speaking of examples. However, when they request that any statements orally or written be suppressed, that would include what he said to the family, to his wife, to his mother, but on the phone calls. But they don't mention any of that like in the memorandum. They're strictly using the examples of the prison, what he has said to prison inmates and to guards. Through this process, Allen, I said that. Okay, nearly all of these statements appear to have occurred between mid-March of 2023 and June of 2023. Mid-April, mid-May, and June. So like 3 months. During this time frame, there also exists medical and psychiatric records suggesting that Allen was in a state of psychosis, and they attach a report about that. Well, we're going to be getting to some more details. Allen's defense team has learned that Allen was not only detained in an isolation cell in WCU, but that prison officials chose to post inmates at Allen's cell door and required the inmates to keep logs of all of Allen's actions, statements, and behaviors. Yes, very interesting, Chalet. Now, this part here, I think, is key to what they're trying to say as justification for the suppression, in that if Richard Allen is just talking to another inmate and he's just saying something in a friendly manner or whatever, that's one thing. But if the prison officials required the inmates to keep these logs, those particular inmates keeping the logs, being required to keep logs, are now acting on behalf of the state, right? I think that, and from when I was watching Defense Diaries yesterday go through this, I don't think they ever brought that up. But to me, because when they're talking about all the different constitutional rights that have been violated, one of them is like a right to have your lawyer present and things like that, right? And to be represented. And so if he's saying something to these inmates that are acting on behalf of the state, then it starts to fall under him having representation. I'm not a lawyer, okay? But that's something to think about, to explore, if that's the case. This appears, so the inmates keeping logs of everything appears to have occurred during all hours of the day and continued over the course of much of Allen's stay in the WCU. These inmates, all of whom are convicted felons, were not only actively engaged in surveilling Allen's activities, but were also communicating with him from time to time. Allen's attorneys have also learned that at some point in early April 2023, prison officials deliberately pulled the inmates from Allen's cell door and replaced them with prison guards. And I believe those prison guards that they replaced them with included the Odinist guards. Allen's attorneys have learned that this appears to have been prompted by an inmate or inmates engaging Allen regarding his pending charges and communicating Allen's thoughts and words to the families of these inmates, thereby violating any sense of confidentiality that might exist within the walls of the penitentiary. Now, I don't know that any inmate that's been convicted would have any sense of confidentiality, but I don't know. One thing for sure, though, that if these inmates are hearing things, Alan's telling them something, and then they're on the phone with their families, telling their families these things, or during a visitation or whatever, then now information is getting out to the public. It's a leak. It's a leak to the public about the case, right? About something that he's saying. And whether that's a confession or whether he's saying he's innocent or whatever he's saying, they don't, nobody, neither side, the prosecution and the defense, they don't want things getting out. Most notably, Alan's living circumstances within the prison appear to have been designed, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to expose him to some of the harshest conditions that even the most heinous of convicted offenders have not endured. The coercive environment was initially the product of Alan being detained in an observation cell used for convicted inmates with suicidal ideations. I'm just going to say stuff. We'll see what happens. This single cell, located in a pod, is one of the approximately 60 individual segregation cells, all containing felons convicted of crimes such as burglary, robbery, child molestation, and murder. And I'm not going to read all these citations. They cite where each bit of their information comes from. It's in the memorandum. You can get the memorandum and look at it yourself if you're interested in that. Each and every one of these inmates had the ability to communicate with Alan by yelling at him at all hours of the day and night, and by chastising him every time he was removed from his cell for purposes of recreation, showering, or other administrative reasons. So there's this APOD, which in his cell is one of approximately 60 individual segregation cells. But when you're in this APOD, you can yell and people, people can hear you, right? So they're yelling at Alan. And I don't know, it sounds to me like they made up some kind of little schedule. Okay, I'll take from 12 to 2, and you take from 2 to 4, and you take from 4 to 6, so that he was constantly under a barrage of noise, right? Alan's attorneys have learned that he was referred to as a baby killer and that he was the target of other similar accusations during his stay in WCU. Prison records reflect that Alan was placed on suicide watch during the majority of his stay at the WCU. They probably got some extra food in their canteen. Yeah, probably. And whether or not it was coordinated by the prison guards or they just did it on their own, like they said, intentionally or unintentionally, it still happened. And that is definitely, and we're not talking days, we're talking a year, or well, at least months that he was in this APOD. Definitely months. So prison records reflect that Alan was placed on suicide watch during the majority of his stay at the MCU. That's what I mean. A year, including upon his initial detention in November 2022. This occurred despite the fact that there were no underlying findings to suggest he was suicidal. Allen's designation as suicidal subjected him to even harsher circumstances than those of other offenders on the unit. For example, Allen's bed consisted of a metal plate with a thin mattress, all of which was just a few inches from the concrete floor. Allen was issued an anti-suicide smock, which covered his body no better than that of the garment of a caveman. Interesting. Allen's food was served to him through a cuff portal, and his dining habits involved him sitting on his bed or on the floor, as his cell was not equipped with a table or chair that would otherwise serve as a rudimentary dining arrangement. So I'm guessing that if he had been held in jail, say as Brian Koberger or something, that they might actually, that might be normal. They wouldn't mention it if it wasn't normal, if he had been in jail where he's supposed to be instead of in a prison. Right. And you guys know the cuff portal is that little opening that they put the hands in to put the cuffs on, and then they'll open the door, but they won't open the door until you put your hands through that little slot, right? So it's big enough to put the tray of food in there. Allen's cell also contained a steel toilet and a sink, both in direct line of sight of the inmates and guards assigned to his surveil. The toilet bowl was located approximately 24 inches from his bed. That's sad. And you know, if you're a convicted criminal and these are your conditions, you're lucky that you're alive and you didn't suffer the death penalty, right? But to be innocent until proven guilty and have to be in this situation is pretty rough. Allen's attorneys learned that Allen was not only under constant surveillance, but that the lights remained on in his cell for many days and nights. And now you guys realize that some of this is defined as torture, right? It is also true that due to his suicide watch designation, he was afforded less or no recreation time and less of an opportunity for showers. In essence, his suicide designation was the cause for the removal of additional privileges, to the extent the word privilege even applies, which in turn further fostered an environment that led to the deterioration of Allen's mental and physical health. Footnote. Allen's intake records with the DOC, Department of Corrections, reflect that he was 5 foot 5 inches tall and 175 pounds at admission in November of 2022. His weight by April of 2023 had dropped below 135 pounds. So he lost 50 pounds in six months. That's a lot of weight to lose so fast. There's number 3. Continuing here. In all, for nearly 13 months at the WCU, Allen was deprived of any social interaction, very little to no privacy, limited recreation time, and was left to entertain himself. We'll find out what he did to entertain himself in a minute. Most people, Chalet says, most people gain weight because the food is so full of sodium. Yeah, a lot of salt and everything. Unfortunately, Allen's unusual detention circumstances would extend beyond the door of his isolation cell. Whenever Allen was removed from the confines of his 12 by 8 foot steel and concrete box, aka cell, he was shackled with ankle cuffs, a belly chain, box cuffs on his hands, and guided around by guards with a lead, or what most people would refer to as a leash. And Chalet says, food is all you have to look forward to, even when it sucks. And yeah, you haven't been in prison. I haven't either, and I hope I never am. As if this restriction of his basic freedom of movement was not enough, prison officials assigned a videographer to Allen to record his movements around the prison, including when he would meet with his lawyer. During all the meetings between Allen and his attorneys, he remained shackled, as referenced above, making simple tasks difficult, such as taking a drink of water from a water bottle. So he's got like these box shackles. Let me box shackles, prison images. Okay, I see. So let me share this with you. So present. So I'm gonna have to stop this one for a minute. So it's this kind, okay? So you're very restricted in, and plus they're on his waist, right? They said that and this one's on the waist, right? These are all showing how it's on the waist. So he cannot move his hands up to his mouth, right? He's going to have to put his head down and then tilt when you're oh my God. Yeah, that would be difficult to have a drink of water. So let me go back. Present, share screen, share the window. Okay, so let's go back to this. Drink from a bottle of water. Continuing here. Allen would not be able to communicate as much as a hand gesture due to his shackled state. During other meetings, prison officials placed the video camera outside of a window in the visitation room and required Allen to sit on a hard plastic chair directly in line with the video camera, which was less than 10 feet away. So anything he says, even if you can't hear what he's saying, you can have someone who's a lip reader, like look at it and because it's on his face, so you're going to know anything he says. Allen's highly unusual detention circumstance extended even to visits with his wife. During one visit, Allen was transported outside of the WCU to a building reserved for visitation for those inmates in general population. Allen again was shackled and confined during the transport and immediately re-robed into a green jumpsuit before seeing his wife. He was, however, unshackled during the visit. Well, that's a plus. His embrace with his wife was controlled by prison protocol, which permitted only a few brief seconds of contact, despite the fact that Allen had not seen his wife for the better part of 6 months. Allen was required to sit on the opposite side of the table from his wife and had 2 prison guards stationed within earshot of each end of his table. They were left with absolutely no privacy. I can say I have visited people in prison. In California, and this person had several years in prison, so they would be in one prison and then they would get transferred to a different prison. So I've had visits in different prisons, and he wasn't shackled. We did sit. They told us, yeah, you can have like a brief little hug. There were guards around, but not like next to us. And then there was a table and we sat on opposite sides of the table. So there was no glass in between us, no talking through like a little phone in the glass thing. We were able to have freedom. And, if we wanted to like whisper to each other, there wasn't anybody around that would have been like eavesdropping. I don't know what kind of microphones they might have in the ceiling or something to pick up sound. Obviously, things exist like for sports when people have remember that microphone with the big cone so that they could try to hear what the football players were saying on the field. That kind of stuff exists. Could they have something like that set up so you can hear what everybody's saying, make sure they're not saying anything wrong? Probably, but I don't recall anything like that. When I've been in a prison to visit a prisoner. So yeah, to have the two prison guards stationed within earshot of each end of his table on both ends. It's intimidating. It would be intimidating. They were left with absolutely no privacy. Yeah, they don't want him talking for sure, Chalet. They were left with absolutely no privacy. The room was completely empty, except for his lawyers and a few other prison guards who were also stationed within the building. This provided no background noise whatsoever, which might offer up some aspect of privacy as he and his wife tried to communicate. And his restrictions did not end there. Here, Alan and his wife were also denied the simple concession of getting a drink of water during this visit, despite the fact that there were a number of vending machines and a water fountain within 10 to 20 feet from his table. Yeah. And who knows what the temperature is? It air conditioned in this room or not? I mean, how long is the visit? I think we had like maybe an hour or something to visit, and there were vending machines, and we were able to purchase things out of the vending machines and have them. But yeah, sometimes you're thirsty. You need a drink of water. At least he didn't have the shackles on. Alan's unusual detention involves an even stranger set of circumstances. Okay. During the course of their representation of Alan, his attorneys discovered the existence of dozens and dozens of police reports, audio interviews, and other investigative findings that centered on a group of suspects associated with pagan Norse spiritual religious practices. These suspects considered themselves Odinists. Well, so we can say they considered these suspects, being Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Elvis Fields, on their Facebook pages, they would call themselves Odinists. Now, if you remember, the guards, when they had a statement about their patches, said, "Oh, we're not Odinists, we're pagans," whatever. But these suspects that he's talking about considered themselves Odinists, all of which were referenced in the Franks motion, yes, and the memorandum, yes, and the second Franks motion and memorandum previously filed with this court, footnote number 4. The facts and circumstances surround the possibility that these individuals, otherwise known as Odinists, are specifically referenced in the Franks motion and memo filed with this court on September 18, 2023 and October 2nd, 2023. All right. Alan incorporates herein the details referenced in the Franks filing rather than restating the lengthy details in this memorandum. So, about the Odinism. Okay. Alan's lawyers also discovered, hey, Andy's in the house. Andy's in the house. So Alan's lawyers also discovered that at least 2 guards assigned to his pod and or his movements around the facility also held themselves out to be affiliated with the pagan Norse god known as Odin. See the affidavits of Joshua Robinson and Randy Jones. So those are the 2 that were wearing the patches. One of which, I don't know which one, when he had to remove the patches, tattooed his face. The guards proudly displayed their Odinistic beliefs on their own prison uniforms, despite the fact that such a display was in direct violation of their uniform policy. And on at least one occasion, one of these guards tased Alan after he was placed into his secured 8x11 cell because Alan refused to move his hands from the cuff port in the door of his cell, a cuff port that is barely large enough through which to slide a meal tray. Alan posed absolutely no risk to anyone at the time he was tased. So they put him inside. They say, okay, put your hands through. They unlock the shackles, the shackles on his hands. But instead of, putting his hands back inside, he just left them there and didn't want to pull them back in, at which point they proceeded to tase them. Yet what his attorneys are saying is that even though he left his hands there and didn't put them back in, there was no one on the outside of that cell that was in threat, that was under a threat. There's nothing he couldn't grab their necks or something. He couldn't punch them. There's nothing he could do to anybody. As soon as they walk away, if he wants, I don't believe that this port is flipped down and locked once they walk away. I think that the port stays open. So any time of the night or day that he wants to get up and put his hands through there, he could. They just wanted to have an excuse to tase him, apparently. Okay. Alan had also battled depression throughout most of his adult life. He was medicated over the course of his life and, in fact, had sought out therapeutic resources to treat and manage his depression. Good for him. That's a very difficult thing to deal with, and he was managing it. Now, one thing that in case anybody doesn't know, medications that deal with mental issues, mental health, depression or otherwise, they need to have a certain level in your body. And let me tell you, when you're first taking them, the doctors they're fiddling with the dosage. Is this too high? Is this too low? And getting it just right. And it can take months to get your dosage right. And then once you have that, you can't, it's not even like once a day or twice a day. You have to take it at exactly the same time every day. If you take it at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., you can't take it at 9 a.m. You have to take it at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. It has to be taken at exactly the same time every day. That's what these medications are like. All right. And so continuing, the IDOC gave very little consideration to Alan's condition at the time of his intake and initial incarceration in the WCU, especially given the unusual circumstances in which he was detained. It is also believed that Alan's medications were administered in a less than consistent fashion while he was on the unit, all of which would have contributed to his inability to endure his living environment during his pre-trial detention at the WCU. No, Delphi's in Indiana. This all happened in Indiana. Kind of like from north to south, it's kind of in the middle of the state, but a little to the west. Yeah, they wanted to torture him, for sure. I think also that maybe if one of the side effects of not having your correct medication is death, right? Vomiting, nausea, death, right? They're messing with his medications. They could be killing him. They're messing with his mind, Yeah, Indiana. I mean, there could be a Delphi in Georgia, but it's not the one where this case is. Then they have the term issue. The issue in this case is whether the state violated Alan's Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights and federal and state due process rights by detaining him in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison segregation unit while he was awaiting trial. Allen's statements were involuntary and should be suppressed. Now they go into all of the rules, okay? Coercive police activity is necessary to predicate to a finding that a confession is involuntary within the meaning of due process clause, and they do all these citings of things, all right? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to go through that part. Analysis, notwithstanding the lower standard for showing involuntariness set by the Indiana Constitution, it is indisputable that Allen's detention circumstances were manufactured by the Carroll County Sheriff purposefully and without the existence of any sense of due process, as the court signed the safekeeping order without requiring the state to establish the burden of proof required by the statute. Okay, so they're going right back to the very beginning when the Carroll County Sheriff requested that he get moved to the Department of Corrections, right? That just by making the request at all, he showed purpose, right? And that there was no due process, he didn't even have a lawyer assigned to him yet. And when the judge signed the order, and there was no proof that where he was fine, which they have to show. There was no proof. It's not a big wonder that Judge Diener, who signed this, later that same day, before 5 p.m., withdrew from this case. But this was just the beginning. Allen was then shipped off to WCU and immediately placed on suicide watch in a detention cell where he had little to no accommodations, as described before, not even those offered up to the other 2,000 convicted inmates housed across the prison yard. Almost simultaneous with Allen's isolation from human contact, prison companions were placed at his doorstep and tasked with the duty of reporting his every move and recording his every word, which makes them actors of the state. The companions appear to have gone above and beyond this duty by communicating with Allen about his case and even praying with him as he struggled to withstand the rigors of his incarceration. This is interesting. I would love to hear A.R. Hayes talk about this, because is it possible that, first of all, if you've been in prison for a while, you know how to get around in the prison. You know how it works. You know the hoops you have to jump through. I think you get really good at judging the other inmates. And everybody says they're innocent. Oh, I didn't do this or whatever. A lot of people brag about it, say they did, but it's kind of like, yeah, everybody in prison says they're innocent, right? And maybe they've been in the prison. They know how everybody's treated. Maybe they started to say, well, we don't have any companions reporting every move of everybody else. Not everybody else gets shackled like this. Not everybody else gets, tased when they won't put their hands inside. No, maybe in the beginning it was like, yeah, everybody's participating, baby killer, all of this, making all the noise. But maybe these guys started to go, you know what? Something's off here. Because just because you're a criminal in prison doesn't mean you're stupid. The yard call, okay, walk in the yard, clearing the tier, yard recall count time. I know somebody who was in San Quentin when Charles Manson was there, and anybody who was like in the hallway or something at the time, like if he was getting walked back to his cell or walked somewhere, right? Everybody had to like stand on the sides and so that like nobody was in touching, within reach of him. Everyone had to stand to the side as he walked through and stuff. And that's Charles Manson, January 6th guy said it was a racist, and once he got in there, the people learned he was not after a short while. Racking the tier, clearing the tier, racking the tier. An escort, grab a wall. Escort, grab a wall. Do you know this from personal experience, Andy? Yeah, maybe that's what they said. Yeah. I mean, because I'm just vaguely recalling what I was told by the person that I knew who was in there and experienced it. But that sounds about right. Okay. So continuing here, their mere presence at his doorstep is akin to a case that's called Masaya versus United States, where police obtained incriminating statements from a jailhouse informant who engaged the defendant in a conversation and developed that relationship of trust and confidence with the defendant such that he had revealed incriminating information about the charged crime when counsel was not present. You see, the key here is that it was all set up as an informant, and therefore they're acting on behalf of the police. It's not just a conversation with another cellmate or inmate. They were actually being used by the police in the jail. And as we've already read, these inmates that became companions were required to write down everything he did and said. So they were basically employed and became actors of the state, at which point you need to have counsel present. Uses. Why? Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. Not UES, YES. Yes. Okay. And then more citations. The court held that this was improper and suppressed the statements. So they're saying the same thing. Well, let me just continue reading. This trial court should do the same. All right. Hey, there's some messy stuff up in this. I don't know where it is when we'll get to it, but it's not pretty what he went through. Because this is the tip of the iceberg. The trial court's decision regarding admissibility of a confession or incriminating statement is controlled by determining from the totality of the circumstances whether the statement was given voluntarily rather than induced through violence, threats, coercion, or other improper influence so as to overcome the defendant's free will. More citations. Standard indicators for voluntariness include whether the confession was freely self-determined, the product of a rational intellect and free will, rational intellect, his medications were messed up, without compulsion or inducement of any sort, and whether the accused will was overborne. Okay. Here, Allen's free will was overcome by the forces of his environment, all of which were placed upon him by the government and its actors, the prison guards, the companions. They're all part of the government and its actors. Allen, a man with bona fide pre-existing mental health issues, was detained in an isolation cell, entirely isolated from any sense of meaningful human contact, and then offered up the most basic amenities of life through a cuff port hole in his door. He was reduced to sleeping on a mattress and floor, also doubled as his dining table, because his cell had no such accommodation. His attire was reduced to nothing more than a suicidal smock covering only a portion of his body. Alan's healthiest accommodations came in the form of recreation time, not to exceed 4 hours per week. So that's about a half an hour a day. In this space, there was not enough room. There was not enough room to jog or run, only an exercise bike and a pull-up bar. Alan's other accommodation would have been a window slit that was inside his cell. His view of anything outside of the boundaries of the penitentiary would have been impaired by the rusty chain link and razor wire of at least 2 separate fences between him and any sense of freedom. To the extent Alan was ever allowed to be removed from his cell, he was shackled at the ankles, wrists, further confined by a belly chain and cuff port, and guided around the prison on a leash. All ideal ways to confine and control the movements of a convicted killer or some other convict who, in addition to his conviction, posed a threat to himself or the prison staff. Alan, at 5 feet 5 inches tall and 173 pounds soaking wet, and with not one single criminal conviction on his rap sheet, met none of these conditions. Footnote number 6. Oh, they're just mentioning that where they got the weights from. Okay. As if this treatment wasn't enough, Alan was forced to endure the intimacies. Okay, wait. Before I read that paragraph, let me see. From Andy. Okay, only in this chat, 81 through 84, Tehachapi, I'm assuming you mean Tehachapi, for unlawful detainment. I too saw Charlie in a Catholic church through 2 Sallyport locked hallway doors, one day of transit in San Quentin. Wow. Only in this chat. Okay. Oh, the years from 81 to 84. Wow. Hope does not change your thought of me. Of course, I don't care. Hey, the past is the past. We all make mistakes. Like I said, there's somebody that I knew that was in there. That's how I told the story. And they served their time and they're out. You know, the other person that I was talking about when I had those I was talking about a different person. Then they served their time. They're out. You know, they're normal members of society. You know, a few lifetimes ago. Exactly. Chalet says, you badass. Okay. Yeah. So any contribution that you have, you're welcome, certainly welcome to share. We want, you know, we get all these different perspectives. All righty. As if this treatment wasn't enough, Alan was forced to endure the intimacies of his restraint systems, even while he was meeting with his court-appointed lawyers inside the confines of the maximum security segregation unit located inside of the Westfield Correctional Facility. And I think they meet with enough people that, yeah, I mean, where's he going to go? What's he going to do? Right? And he's not convicted yet. And to add insult to injury, Alan's meetings with his attorneys occurred while he had a video camera aimed at his face, recording sessions that should have been afforded the most private of environments so as to protect the relationship between attorney and client. Yes, we all agree with that. You saw Charlie in Vacaville, Catholic Church, sent lunch in transit to San Quentin. Yeah. Vacaville and San Quentin are very close to each other. Yeah. Wow, Andy, you the man. You've been around the block. You've been around the block. You got some stories to tell. You got some tea to spill, as they say nowadays. You're out on the fire crew to get off the yard. Oh, right now? Oh no! Got it. Like so they use prisoners to volunteer for the fire crew, and so it gives you a chance to get out of the yard. Yeah, you got street cred, Chalet says. Okay, all of this occurred while Alan's medications were being adjusted by the prison medical team, the combination of which factors reduced him to nothing more than a human experiment. Alan's free will was overcome. Wow. Pretty powerful. Under the Indiana Constitution, the voluntariness of a confession must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And in reviewing voluntariness, the courts look at the totality of the circumstances, reviewing all the evidence in the record rather than focusing only on the evidence supporting the finding of voluntariness. Under the U.S. Constitution, the prosecution only has to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the confession was voluntary. As explained below, the state cannot meet its burden of showing voluntariness here, even applying the lower standard of preponderance. The federal courts have a long history of regulating the admission of confessions that have been a product of state action that exploits the weak and compromised through the interrogatory and custodial processes. Interrogatory, yeah, and custodial processes. And then they cite Blackburn versus State of Alabama, quote, and this is the United States Supreme Court. It says, quote, and before I read that, drink of cherry flavored water. Yeah, thanks. Not my proudest moments. Hey, we all have a few of those moments that we're not proud of. Okay, that coercion can be mental as well as physical, and that the blood of the accused is not the only hallmark of an unconstitutional inquisition. A number of cases have demonstrated, if demonstration were needed, that the efficiency of the rack and the thumbscrew can be matched, given the proper subject, by more sophisticated modes of persuasion. A prolonged interrogation of an accused who is ignorant of his rights and who has been cut off from the moral support of friends and relatives is not infrequently an effective technique of terror or torture. Thus, the range of inquiry in this type of case must be broad, and this court has insisted that the judgment of each instance be based upon consideration of the totality of the circumstances, unquote. That's the Supreme Court. All righty. Alan's case falls within these federal parameters. In Blackburn, the case that they were just talking about, the defendant had a documented history of mental illness, having served in the military, which ultimately resulted in his discharge because of a medical finding that he suffered from some form of psychosis. He was in the process of being treated in the days and weeks leading up to the commission of the crime and his ultimate apprehension. After enduring an 8 to 10 hour interrogation, Blackburn was given a prepared written statement with admissions offered up by him in the course of the interrogation, and he ultimately signed the written statement 2 days later. Turns out all the ladies love outlaws. Oh yeah, because Shelly's calling Andy a rebel. Yeah, all the ladies love the outlaws. Okay. So the Supreme Court made that gave that ruling about a case of a man who had an 8 to 10 hour interrogation. That was the subject of his mental torture. 8 to 10 hours of interrogation, right, is the point that they're coming up with. Here, Alan, oh, yeah. Just a second. You know. Oh, now my friend Cecile's sending a video. She's got to wait. Okay. Here, Alan endured a longer, more sustained form of interrogation, one that lasted more than 5 months before he was finally broken. Already suffering from a bona fide mental health disorder, and then having been cut off from the moral support of his wife, mother, and daughter, Alan was weakened to the point where he slipped into a state of psychosis plagued with grossly disorganized, delusional, paranoid, and highly dysfunctional behavior. We're going to get in, they're going to describe some of this grossly disorganized, delusional, paranoid, and highly dysfunctional behavior. And it is saddening, discouraging, enraging. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. These behaviors were manifested through verbal confessions that he may have been drugged, verbal confessions to the double homicide, inconsistent with known facts of the crime scene, that'll come out, periods of not sleeping for days, paranoia, stripping off his clothes, drinking toilet water, covering himself with and eating his own feces, and many other socially unacceptable behaviors. On one occasion, Alan confessed to molesting those 2 young girls and shooting them in the back, which we all know is not what happened. I mean, that is the perfect example of why police don't release all the information. We've said, yeah, okay, hold back something so that if someone makes a false confession, you know that, okay, they didn't know about that, right? He just knows that they confiscated his gun and said there was a shell casing, right? Because that probably came out in his hearing, in his initial arrest, right? So he just, okay, yeah, I shot them in the back. So he gave a false confession, exactly. Which is why they're asking for it to be suppressed. You know, technically it shouldn't, I mean, the prosecution shouldn't even be thinking of using it. And they weren't molested. There was no assault on them like that. On another occasion, he professed his sorrow for molesting Abby, Libby, and others, which he specifically named, which obviously hadn't happened. These facts are known to be falsities, none of which are supported by the autopsy findings by Dr. Roland Kaur as to the cause of death of the girls, and unsupported by the absence of any evidence that either one of the girls were sexually assaulted near or before the time of their deaths. By the way, then when they list all the other like attachments, the autopsy is there. I mean, we don't get that, but that they're giving to the court. So, because I have always wondered, has the autopsy been released to them. So the autopsy should have the time of death. These facts, okay, I said the blah, 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 blah. Let me move this up. We are here. At the time Allen uttered these falsities, the state's actors, see, those are those companions, right? Which, because they're being called state actors, would have required legal representation present. The state's actors were in the ready position with pen in hand, documenting the entirety of Allen's mental and physical deterioration and actions stemming therefrom. The infringements on Allen's legal rights didn't stop there. The state thugs, yeah, that's right, Chalet. Inmate companions then spread the good word of Allen's confessions to inmates in general population at Westville, prompting these inmates to then share the information with their respective family members in public. Proof of these leaks were offered up by the state in the form of audio recorded interviews and accompanying transcripts, which included in large volumes of discovery dumps received by the defense in the recent past. So remember that there was like, we're taking your discovery, you guys are off the case, give us back all the evidence. Then they have the other two. Then Baldwin and Rosie get put back on, and they have to give them the discovery again. And everyone said, you can't just trust that it's the same thing. You got to go through it and see if there's anything different. Recent discovery. Right? However, neither Allen nor his legal team are aware of any self-reporting of said leaks by the state to the defense or by the state to the court, despite the fact that the state was aware of this information as early as May 12, 2023, when Patton and Elliott were interviewed by law enforcement investigators. Allen's due process rights have been all but ignored. Andy says, knowingly perpetuating a false confession for a conviction is terrible. Not only wrong guy doing time, but real perp walks. Absolutely. And I think one of the things they're kind of alluding to here is that when the prosecution was trying to hold, to have a contempt hearing on Baldwin and Rosie about the leak that happened from their office, right, with what's his name taking pictures of the photos, and that they're like, oh, you didn't report it right away, or about the emails, the one email that went to the wrong person. You didn't report it right away. They kept pushing that. So now they're throwing that, just in case you missed that had happened. So now they're throwing that back on them, that they didn't report this to anybody, to the defense or the court, ever. Right? They only found it in this latest discovery. All righty. It is also established that the 14th Amendment forbids fundamental unfairness in the use of evidence, whether true or false. As important as it is that persons who have committed crimes be convicted, there are considerations that transcend the question of guilt or innocence. Thus, in cases involving involuntary confessions, this court enforces the strongly felt attitude, this court being Lisbon versus people of state of California, I think, enforces the strongly felt attitude of our society that important human values are sacrificed, where an agency of the government in the course of securing a conviction wrings a confession out of an accused against his will. This insistence upon putting the government to the task of proving guilt by means other than inquisition was engendered by historical abuses which are quite familiar. And then they give other courses. Snow's in the house. Snow in the house. Woohoo! Thank you for being here. So basically, yeah, you're not allowed to have an inquisition and force people to confess to something. The truth or falsity of Allen's statements are of no consequence to this analysis. Allen has been treated unlike any other pretrial detainee in Indiana in recent history. The methodology employed by the justice system is one of first impression, and therefore the circumstances created by this methodology should not be part of any consideration of Allen's guilt or innocence. The system of pretrial detention employed against Allen runs afoul of the Fifth and Sixth Amendments of the United States Constitution and Article 1, Section 14 of the Indiana Constitution. It is for these reasons any and all incriminating statements made by Allen while incarcerated should be suppressed. Bradley A. Rossi. So there you go. There you go. I mean, it's horrible, the condition. I mean, what? Okay, I have a friend of mine who had 3 children. 2 of them were autistic. And one of the things that she had to deal, bless her heart, all 3 children survived. She survived. They're adults now. But when they were little, they would play with their feces and like draw on the walls with their feces, and stuff. And I mean, my heart broke for her that every day, maybe multiple times every day, she's cleaning poop off the walls, and so for a grown man to get to the point of what he's got nothing else to do because he's been locked in there for so long and he's having no contact except for bad contact, that taking your poop and eating it and playing with it, you got nothing else to do. What level of deprivation do you have to get to have that behavior? Yeah, Snow says you have to take into consideration isolation madness. Absolutely. And he was there for 5 months or more. November to whatever. They mentioned 5 months at some point in here. But over a year in that prison, it's just, it's horrifying that someone not convicted of a crime can have to endure those conditions when you're not convicted yet. Even if you're convicted, there's certain, we're not allowed to torture people. Snow says total isolation will break you completely within a matter of days, let alone months. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've heard that whole thing, but yeah, it's horrifying that someone has to go through this. It could be any of us. If we don't, I want to say, if we don't stick up for Richard Allen, and I don't mean whether he's innocent or guilty. I'm not talking about that, but just as his rights as somebody who's in the judicial process, who's awaiting trial, who hasn't even had a trial yet. You know, if we don't stand up for his rights as someone who's been arrested, then it could happen to any of us. Did the Geneva Convention long ago, determine that total isolation is strictly forbidden, even during wartime torture, as its impact is worse than anything else you can do to a human? Zero recovery. Oh, OMG. Oh my goodness. I've never heard that, the zero recovery. That's people, so even people who believe he's guilty need to stand up about this too. They don't, not say, well, he deserves it, he's guilty, who cares? No. You can't go down that slippery slope. I wonder if Gull can be charged under the Geneva Convention for denying his, his lawyers, gave a motion to have him removed from this correctional facility for this behavior. The warden, the guards, Judge Gull, that have all, the sheriff that initially had him sent there. Wonder if they can have some kind of charges under the Geneva Convention. Administrative segregation. That doesn't seem like that's as bad as this total isolation. Snow says, yep, once you break, there's a part of you that never gets put back correctly psychologically. Your clinical work, you ran into only a few people who had endured even a fraction of it. Well, if we want to get into like the multiple personality disorder, which a lot of time is from ritualistic abuse, over generations and generations and generations, there are people that know how to split the brain, to do something so torturous to a child. And let's say the child's name is Betty and you call them Jane during whatever torturous is happening to them. And so then Betty now has a split personality that's called Jane. Because Betty's brain can't function as Betty with all the torture. So that has to get split off into another section of the brain, which was called Jane during the torture. So then now that personality is Jane. And they can do that multiple times. It's very rare that someone has a split personality. Only two can happen. But is that thunder? Is it going to rain? The hole, yeah, I got thrown into the hole for solitary confinement. I've been to Alcatraz. Oh, maybe it's fireworks. That could be fireworks because it is the Cambodian New Year. We get 3 New Years in Cambodia. We get International New Year, January 1st. We get the Chinese New Year, and we get the Khmer New Year. Khmer is the Cambodian culture. It's raining for you. You must be strong to be able to endure time with yourself. I know you probably didn't mean that as funny, Andy, but it kind of tickled me that, like, yeah, yourself can maybe not be the best person to spend time alone with, right? But you're right. You do have to be strong. Today, Khmer New Year is 3 days long. Today is the first of the 3 days. Hey, Tony. Yeah, you know where they are. Yeah. You were MK Ultra by your uncle, who was originally in the Marine Corps. During that time, he was offended that I was too quiet as a child, so he changed that. Oh my gosh, no, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. It doesn't matter how strong you are with mental fortitude. You think that you think you have, you will break. I have experienced that. I was a very strong, independent person. Um, and um, so when I was 18, I graduated high school. I believed in the Brady Bunch and the Waltons, and I wanted to have a big family. So I figured I need to start having babies. I need to get married and have babies so that I can have like 8 or 10 kids and then still be young by the time it's all done and be a young grandma, right? So I got to get started right off the bat. And so I chose my ex-husband. And I knew before we married, before we said I do, there were red flags, and I knew that it wasn't the best thing. But I convinced myself that, he'll be away at work or whatever, and I'll be a stay-at-home mom, and I'll raise the children the way they should be, and all of this. And he turned out to be an abusive a-hole, and it was a lot more mental for a long, on me. And, he'd like spank too hard, spank too much, so there was some physical crossing the line with the kids. We were together 11 years, and, at the end of that 11 years, it had escalated, and I had police reports and everything, and it was not a good situation. And I, at 18, would have never believed I would have gotten to the broken state that I was 11 years later. And it took years of therapy, years of rebuilding my life in order to get through that, and some people have it worse. We all have our journey that we have to go through. But yeah, I did experience that. In that broken, like you're saying, that brokenness, you get to that point of being broken, no matter how strong you think you are. I was strong. I was independent. And yet I got broken, yeah, we think we can change them. 11 years too, Chalet. Oh my gosh. We have so much in common. What the heck? Oh, and then it is so funny that I'm reading things one at a time, and I'm literally not seeing what's underneath it. Anyway, well, we've been an hour and a half, and yeah, that's funny. I feel good about doing this show, going through all that information, and really getting an understanding of what's happening to Richard. I mean, there's so many things we can talk about, this evidence and that evidence, and the cops did this, and what about the, this or that, or the timeline, and, when did the girls die, and this and that, blah, blah, blah. There's so many, many, many facets to this case. But this facet, oh my gosh, it can't be brushed away. It can't be brushed away. It's funny, the stronger you think you are, the greater the chances you breaking. I believe that. It's funny, it just happened twice. The easier you are to break. Wow. That's interesting. That's so interesting, Snow. Yeah, you've been at it all week. I know. I just, let's do another one. There's just, and as I've said before, if there's nothing to say, I'm not going to waste anybody's time, but if there's something happening that, like, okay, then let's do it. Do you ever go to Substack? Thank you, Jesus. Please be with my beautiful son. Oh, no. Substack. I don't know. We are going, yeah, okay. You're going to get addicted. Yeah, we get addicted to each other, to having a safe place to, like, express our views. Wasn't that great last night that there was a guy that was kind of like against, that felt that the Apple River trial jury had the right verdict? I love that. that please, let's have, it's great when we all think the same, we love that, but yeah, let's have a little bit of discourse. That's good. Shake things up. Let's listen to other sides, and understand each other, and not just push what we think on everybody else. I know what I think, and I'm going to say what I think. It's my show, so I'm going to say what I think. But I welcome people to say what they think too, if they're being rational and they're saying what they really think, not just being a troll. You have a Substack called Facing Trauma Within. There's a lot of your postdoctorate work in there. Okay, well, I think that when the show's over and then there's normal comments, that you can post a link in a normal comment. I think you can. So please, if you don't mind putting it there. Otherwise, we're in Discord. Just send me a link in Discord if you don't want to put it there publicly. But if you want it there publicly where other people can read it too, because maybe they're interested in the subject about Richard Allen and his incarceration, and this would help them, then please, by all means, put it in the normal comments. It doesn't exist until after the show is finished. You cannot post links here in the chat. You cannot post links in the chat. But I think I know that when I've commented, maybe some people set it where you can't post a link, because I know I have posted links on as a comment in other people's. It might be a setting though that each individual person does. It's totally public and 100% free in Substack. Okay, I want to see it. Excuse me. I mean, and if you can't, tell you what, let's do an experiment. Try and post it as a comment as soon as the show is done. And then if you can't, then send it to me on Discord and I will post the link in the comments so that other people, because maybe there's more people that can benefit from it, from your work that you did. Only channel moderators are able to leave links. Well, for sure in the chat. I know that 100% in the chat. But you know what I'm saying, the difference between the chat, the live chat, and the comments after the show is done. So just test it for me. Because I know I have posted links as comments. Is it that no, I was just questioning myself that maybe I've posted links in my own comments, but no, I'm sure that I've been on other channels' comments and put a link, at least on a few occasions. Yeah, so let's test it. Let's test it, and if it doesn't, then like I said, send it to me in Discord, and then I'll put it in. And alrighty. So with that, I think we've been here long enough for tonight. And you may or may not know that love transcends time and space. So wherever and whenever you are watching this, I love you. And I do. Those aren't empty words. I do. I hope you can feel it from my heart. Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm going to take a couple days off, and I will be back at my regularly scheduled Tuesday. And yeah, love for everybody. Love, 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 love. Everyone likes to do that. You know that you ever see this? K-pop did this. This is supposed to be making a little heart. Like that's the top of the heart, and then it goes down. All the Cambodians like to do that in their pictures. But I'm just curious if you guys have ever seen that. It's cute. Yeah, it's from K-pop. It started with K-pop. I had to look it up. I said, I bet that's K-pop. I looked it up. It is. This, of course, people have been doing for a long time. They still do that too. All right. Love you guys. See you on Tuesday. Bye. Love your emojis.